Good evening. Um, Welcome to this live session. While many others will be joining us soon, I do hope that at the end of this course, you'll be able to learn one or two things to improve on your post-harvest management practices to enhance efficiency, farming efficiency, and also increase your farm income. Because at the end of it all, it is what you have saved, it's what you have preserved that will be able to make for the efforts you have actually put in place as a farmer. So it is noteworthy that you should be able to carry out your responsibilities as a farmer to the latter. What that means is that post-harvest activities as important as planting, caring, and even the harvesting activities. So it is only right, of course, that you share your farm engagement so that you don't only get to harvest and then leave things to fit. No, you are supposed to carry everything along, be holistic in your practices. That is what makes you a good farmer. That is what makes you profitable in your farming. I know for a certain that we have only been, you know, talking about the planting, the caring, and the harvesting. And even the harvesting, we have not been fully discussing it in a way that one can truly understand and know the implications of what we really talk about. So, when you have planted your crops, you have harvested, you should be able to keep it to a certain number of days, months, or even a year for you to be able to use it after some time. You know, that is how the farming culture is. You don't just harvest and then you fall back to the market and try to get things because you have not been able to sustain that which you have harvested. Farming, like we say, is holistic. The planting of the seed is as important as the harvesting of that seed. And the harvesting of that seed is as important as how you preserve it. In preserving, that is how you come to understand whether or not you are a good farmer or you are a bad farmer. So this session we're having, this live stream we're having, is actually an interactive session. We can communicate with each other, right? You can give your inputs in the comment section so that I can be able to see and reply to you. But before that, in this class, you are going to learn how to harvest, the best way to harvest, and then the differences in maturity and in ripening. Because sometimes we harvest crops that are not mature, but we feel they are mature, and then we try to ripen them and hasten them up so that we can consume. We will try to understand the best medium to harvest crops, and certain crops, I mean to say, and the best way to store them, and the best containers to use. And for those that would want to sell them, the best transport system to adapt, so that by the time you take it to the market, your crops will still retain their value, I mean their market value, as much as their nutritional value. So this course is for everybody who is a farmer. and who is intending to go into farming. So that when you have the idea of how to cultivate, you will also not be stranded by the time you harvest your crops. That is why I have taken this day to bring to you this full course. The practical aspect of this course will be when I have harvested some of the things cultivated, and then I have gone back to my farm so I can be able to show you on the field how they are done. But with this interactive session we're having, you can still make do of the information in such a way that by the time you eventually harvest, pending when I will come up with a live session of demonstrating how you can do this practically, you would have leveraged this information to carry out your preservative or post-harvest management practices. So first, let us look at the first module on this particular subject of discussion. The first one is the question of why is post-harvest management important? Why should we discuss post-harvest management? Why should we take our time to discuss it? You and I know that most of the crops get damaged in the storage time, not only on the field. It has been discovered through assessments that 40 to 20% of crops get damaged in storage. What that means is that after struggling with your crops on the field, controlling pests on the field, weeding, and then carefully harvesting, you bring them safely to the storehouse. And in the end, you discover that 20 to 40% of what you have harvested successfully have gone. Have gone simply because there was an attack on them in the storage. And this is post-harvest activity. This is supposed to be something that you are to take care of it as much as you did when they were on the field. So the essence of us having a discussion on post-harvest management is as important as the essence of us having a discussion on how to plant those crops, on how to prepare the land for planting, and on when to harvest, on when to weed, and on when to apply manure. That is how important this discussion is to us as farmers. So, we understand that one of the reasons why our crops get damaged is simply because we do not know how to rightly harvest them, how to rightly collect them after harvesting, how to rightly place them after harvesting, how to transport them, or even how to allow them, or which kind of environment is suitable for them. All of this, because we do not know, causes us great damage, which is why, after careful observation and request by people on how to rightly preserve these crops, I have decided that let me hold this session with you people. And for every one of you that has come here or will be coming, will be joining us subsequently, I do hope that this session will be enriching, we will understand what is here, and we will come to appreciate the fact that we did not actually waste our time coming here. So, if you are joining us, please let me understand whether you are following. You can actually drop something in the comment section so that I can know whether the transmission is going to you or I'm not talking to myself. If you can pay attention, just go ahead to just drop a hi that you can understand and you can hear me so that I will know if we are actually on the same page before I go in fully. Are you there? All right. Okay, that's fine. So let us go with the first one, which is harvesting the right way. One of the causes of post-harvest loss, starts with how we harvest these crops. Yes, I know this will be something strange to us, but how we harvest these crops contributes to how largely we either make gain from this post-harvest or we make losses after, that is during the post-harvest. So harvesting plays a critical role in either making us achieve high yield in the post-harvest activity or making us lose most of the produce. So if we do not harvest rightly, we are at 100% going to lose most of the crops during the storage moment, that is during the post-harvest times. There are crops that you don't harvest them the same way you harvest other crops. For instance, tomatoes or pepper. There is a way you harvest tomato that is different from the way you harvest maize. There's a way you harvest yam that is different from the way you harvest cassava. There is a way you harvest maybe mango that is different from the way you harvest beans. So when you do not know how to harvest these crops, you begin to have post-harvest losses in the end. So the title of this course, this particular interaction we're having, is Do Not Waste Your Harvest. Do not waste your harvest. Because if you waste your harvest, remember, you have spent so much money in clearing the field. You have spent so much money on weeding. You have spent so much money on fertilization. You have spent so much money on harvest. And what then would become of you if at the end of it all, your crops ends up as waste? You understand how critical, how fundamental this session is to us. So your harvest must be done rightly and in a good phase. So let us look at how to harvest some of these crops so as to minimize wastage during post-harvest. Let's take maize, for instance. In harvesting maize, you harvest maize in two ways. Maize can be harvested first time, the first round of maize can be harvested when the husk is still fresh, when the husk is still green. When the husk is still green, with the seed dried. This time is the first phase. This first phase is because you want to eat the corn fresh. When you want to eat the corn fresh, you harvest it when the husk is still green. When the husk is still green and the seed, which is something like the hairy part of it, is dried. That is when the corn is due for the first phase harvest. At this stage, you are harvesting it only for immediate and fresh consumption. And when you are harvesting the corn for the sake of storage or further processing into dry grain, the corn, the husk of the corn and the seed are all dried. This one, the husk is still green. This one, both the husk and the seed are all dried. And when the husk is dried, you will see a brown color. A brown color, meaning that it is ripe for harvest for the sake of processing into dry grains. But when it is for the sake of eating it fresh, the husk is green, but the seed is dried. For the sake of processing further, for preservation, and also for replanting next season, the husk is brown, meaning that it has dried, and also the seed is also dried. So if your intention for harvest, for preservation, for the use of the seed, either for fufu or for eba or some for swallow, you should harvest it only after the husk is dry. That is how you harvest this. But when you harvest it when it is fresh, for the sake of keeping it for storage and for replanting, you are going to incur post-harvest loss. You are going to incur post-harvest loss when you harvest it with the husk being fresh. You are going to incur post-harvest loss. So, for you to avoid post-harvest loss in maize, you should harvest it only when the husk is dried. Only when the husk is dried, and for you to know that the husk is dried, it must be brown. It must be brown in color. It must be brown in color. And when you bring it home, you strip it off of the brown husk and have only the grains and the kernel. That is the kernel and the cob. You have only this. You strip it off, and then you have only the cob and the grain. From where you remove the grain, you separate the grain and dry it further to 12 to 13 moisture content. That is when you can be sure that the corn is very okay for preservation after you have further dried it to 12 to 13 moisture content, meaning that when you break it, it makes sound, it becomes hard. It is not so smooth, it is not so watery, but it is very strong when you try to break it. That is when you can say that this corn is ready to preserve. But when you break it and it's so fresh, not strong, and it is not making sound, should you make contact with iron, it means that maize is not safe for you to immediately take it into the storehouse. Another plant we can look at is the tomato. Tomato and pepper. Tomato and pepper. These two crops, we'll look at them all at once. You know, tomato and pepper have a confusing aspect that people do not always pay attention to. It's not because they don't so much care about it, it's simply that they don't know that there is something they should actually pay attention to. For some of us that will be farming tomato and pepper, or are already farming, one of the mistakes we do that results us to post-harvest losses is that we harvest them prematurely. We harvest them prematurely and we don't put them in the right harvesting medium when we are harvesting them. We put them in the wrong harvesting medium. And in this case, we end up with a lot of losses even before we take them to our houses. So, because of their delicate nature, because of their fragile nature, they have a special way of harvesting and also a medium through which they can be collected before bringing them home. Most people do not pay attention to this, and that is how these post-harvest losses start right from the farm when it comes to tomato and pepper. So for tomato and pepper, unlike maize, for instance, that you can harvest and collect them in a bag, collect them in a sack, in a bag, or any form of complex medium, you cannot harvest tomato and pepper into such medium. Tomato is best harvested and collected in a medium known as crate or basket. You can only achieve that in medium known as crate or basket, because when you harvest them on a farm, you begin to see the damages that your own haphazard storage, careless kind of packaging leads to. So you must be willing as a farmer to have a basket to harvest your tomatoes in, basket or crate. These baskets or crates are in this way. These baskets or crates are in this way, you know. They are in this way, they are breathable. They are breathable. So you harvest your tomatoes into kind of a content. You harvest them into this kind of a container. This is a kind of a basket that you harvest them into. You harvest them into this kind of a content and put them. Don't harvest them in a sack. Don't, for any reason, harvest them in a sack. Or you can harvest them into any kind of breathable basket that of this. Be sure that what you're harvesting is a basket and not a sack. Because when you harvest them in a sack, holding the sack will mean that you will twist it, and in twisting it, you will affect the tomato that is inside or the pepper that is inside, and any injury on them can lead to the damage of many other tomatoes or pepper. So always collect it in a crate and not in a sack or in any non-breathable container. So most farmers don't understand this, and then they go ahead to harvest it into sack. You see a farmer will carry a sack on the shoulder and be harvesting and putting inside. It's not right. This will only damage your tomato. And even before you will package to the market or even take it to the house for sorting, grading, and then for transportation, the tomatoes would have spoiled to a larger extent. So always use crates. And even when you are traveling with it, don't put them in a sack. It is a wrong thing. That is why when you go to our market today, you will see a lot of wasted tomatoes, a lot of budget tomatoes, budget pepper. It's not because they were harvested that way from the farm. It's simply due to the traveling medium and how they were packaged. So don't package your tomato in a sack for any reason. Get crates. I understand that crates are difficult to afford. I understand that baskets are difficult to afford, but please, for the sake of your business, for the sake of your farm, for the sake of durability, and for the sake of longevity of your crops that has been harvested, and to avoid post-harvest losses, endeavor to buy baskets or crates. In that way, you can be able to safely store your grains, store your tomatoes and store your pepper and transport them to market in a state that you actually harvested them. There is one thing that also bothers about this tomato and pepper. There is something called climateric fruits. Climateric fruits are non-climateric. There's something called climateric fruit and non-climateric fruits. There is a concept like that, climateric fruits and non-climateric fruits. Climateric fruits are fruits that after harvesting, even after harvesting, when they are fully matured, but they have not ripened on the plant itself. After harvesting, you keep them in a safe and cool environment. They can still ripen, right? They can still ripen as though they are still on the main plant. That is climateric fruits. An example of climateric fruits are tomatoes, mango, pawpaw. These are examples of climateric fruits. These are examples of climateric fruits. We say climateric fruits are fruits that after they have matured on the plant and have not ripened yet, you can harvest them and keep them in your house. They will still continue to ripen even after harvesting them on the plant. And tomato is one of them. Mango too is one of them. Pawpaw too is one of them. But there's a condition to harvesting them prior to ripening on the plant. There is a condition. The condition is that they must be fully matured. They must be fully matured. And a matured tomato is different from immature tomato. A mature tomato is in a range between green and orange. right? It is in that range. It has not fully ripened. It is about to ripen. Then you harvest it to put it inside. So maybe because pests are disturbing you, animals, you are afraid of people stealing. So you harvest them in that way. They are not premature. They have matured, only that they have not ripened yet. So you will harvest them and take them inside your house. They will continue to ripe inside your house. At that stage, they are very okay to harvest because the lycopene, which is the active ingredient in tomato that everybody should consume, is already activated in the tomato. But when the tomato have not fully ripe and you harvest, it is going to lead to early decay, early rot, which is not good for your post-harvest activities. So don't harvest your tomatoes prematurely. Harvest them maturely, even though they have not ripened. You can harvest them and take them inside because it is a climateric fruit. As much as mango. Some mangoes, when you harvest them, when they are already matured and you keep them inside, it takes them a few days and then they get ripened. As well as your this thing. Your pawpaw. So when you harvest even pawpaw, it has just matured on the fruit has just matured. That's not already ripened yet, but you want to keep it inside so that persons passing by do not steal it. It is going to ripen on its own. So non-climateric fruits, we have them as orange, we have them as pepper, we have them as pineapple. So non-climateric fruits, we have them as orange. If you harvest orange that has not ripened and you want to put it inside, it will never ripen again because you harvested it unripe. It is going to be there. The taste is going to be sour. It is going to be very unpleasant. We also have watermelon too. We also have watermelon in these non-climateric fruits. So pepper, don't harvest green. If your pepper is not naturally green pepper, don't harvest pepper green and expect it to get ripened when you keep it inside the house. It will never get ripened because it is a non-climateric plant. Because you have harvested it prematurely, it is going to be premature. It is going to be premature, and the nutrients that you would have derived from it, if it would have ripened, would not be in it. So do yourself good and do not harvest your pepper if it has not ripened, so to avoid post-harvest losses. What happens? The enzymes that would have kept it very long enough are not active. Then it will get damaged. Right? And another thing I should also remind you about is that the best way to harvest a crop is when it has matured. Don't harvest it early before maturity and long after maturity. When you harvest it long after maturity, it leads to early rot and then damage even before you take it for post-harvest storage. So try your best not to harvest tomatoes, not to harvest your crops long overdue or even before time. We looked at, after harvesting, we look at the tools. For instance, in tomato, we say we should use crates and baskets instead of sacks and other medium that do not favor their containment. So we look at maize, we say maize, you can use sack to harvest your maize, you can use a basin to harvest your maize, but don't use so for your tomatoes, for your pepper, for your fruits, and for your vegetables. Don't use sacks, you can use crates for your vegetables as well. And after looking at all these things, what we shall be looking at now is steps you take after you have harvested your crops on the field. Steps you take after harvesting. So after harvesting your crops, the next thing you should do is to clean them of any dirt. Clean them of any dirt. Like in beans, for instance, the weevil, and even corn, the weevil that attacks them most of the times comes from the field. Most of the time, those things comes from the field. That is why somebody will be asking, I kept this thing. How come it happened? How come this thing got into this the sack? We even tie the sack. For those of us that are here that use herbicide, pesticide that are of synthetic origin, even with that, you still see that those pests will still find their way in, despite tying these sacks. They didn't come from heaven. They didn't come mysteriously. The eggs were already hatched on them in the field. You only did not pay attention. So now that you are here, you should know that when you harvest your crops, try to look at them, examine them carefully, and clean them of any strange substances that you do not know about. Clean them thoroughly. You can clean them with your hand, you can clean them by washing, depending on the crop. For instance, when it comes to corn, you don't need to wash it. As soon as you pull up the husk, the next thing you have to do is to dry it so that those things will leave. Let the environment be very unconducive for them by applying heat, drying it under the shade so that the heat that is coming will expel them before storage. That is the first thing you have to do. The first thing we say, you have to clean those things. Like the tomato, clean it off of the dirt, clean it off of the remnants of any spoilage that is on them from the other ones. Clean it off. Clean your tomatoes. You can use a handkerchief, a very soft material, and clean it off. You can wash it for tomato and pepper. Wash it and air dry it. Then keep it in a safe environment. Keep it in a safe condition. Those are the steps you should take. Cleaning first, because those pests are already attacking them on the field. So they only need a conducive environment for them to continue to propagate. So if you do not clean and you carry them blindly and put into the storehouse, they will continue to damage your crops after a few days or few weeks in storage. So clean them. After cleaning, what you will do is you will sort. Now, some tomato, for instance, if you are doing saving, some tomatoes are bigger than others, and because of that, their prices also differs. So sort your crops according to size, according to the level of ripening, and according to the level of ripening and according to size. Sort them so that you can tag them different prices. That is, if you are selling. And for also in case of sorting too, when you are sorting, you are removing the damaged ones from the good ones, so that you will not mesh them together in order not to continue damaging the good ones. You separate the bad ones from the good ones. That is also called sorting. I will try my best, friend. Thank you so much. I'm so sorry that this is coming this time, but like you said, I have taken note of your point, your observation. It is well taken. Thank you so much, friend. So do your best to sort your crops, the bigger ones from the smaller ones, and the spoiling ones from the good ones. When you sort them differently, you can be able to prevent wastage, you can be able to prevent further damages. So you sort your crops after you have harvested. You remove the damaged ones. You understand? Those ones that are damaged. For instance, tomato that has damaged, it is going to continue inflicting the pains, the damage even in storage. Maize that have kind of weevil things or this maggot stuff that you do not actually understand. If you take them to storage, those pests are going to continue. After they have finished damaging this particular one that you didn't actually pay attention, they are going to damage those ones that are good. So sort to separate the good from the bad before taking them to the storehouse or to the market. The next thing you will do is the storage condition. The storage condition. The best way to store your crops is at room temperature. Room temperature is graduated in 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. 30 to 32 degrees Celsius. That is the room temperature for most of the crops that we harvest in Nigeria. That is the room temperature. You store them in that condition. Most of these pests cannot function rightly when they are at room temperature. Some of them require a temperature higher than this. Some of them require a temperature lower than this. But then for your crops to continue to maintain their nutritional value, they must be at this temperature for you to be able to use them even after some time. So the best way to store, especially grain and tomatoes and vegetables, the best way to store them is to allow them stay at room temperature. So this is the best way to store them. The temperature must be in this way, and the environment must be ventilated. The environment must be ventilated because your crops, as you have harvested, they have different things that make them get spoiled. It may not be the pest. Some may be the mold. Some may be microorganisms that are fermenting on them in case of tomato. And the mold may be as a result of bacteria or fungi that has come as a result of the heat in the room, which is not too good for your own storage. So the environment must be well ventilated so that there will be, these crops that you harvest, they breathe. These crops breathe. If you don't know, if you want to understand how this crop breathe, now put them in a room and don't put anything. When you go inside, you will hear, you will perceive their natural odor. If you know the odor of maize, when you keep maize in a room that is locked without ventilation, when you enter, you will perceive it. It means they are breathing, they are exchanging with the environment. And if there is no escape, the humidity in that environment becomes very unfavorable for the plant, but favorable for this bacteria or fungi to continue to infest on your crops. That is why you will start to see some crops, some of the seeds, some of the grain getting dark, getting brown because of the non-ventilated area that they have been kept. Because of this, your crops are going to suffer a great consequence, are going to suffer great losses. So it is not good that you should keep them in a non-ventilated place. The place you are keeping them should be well ventilated. And in case where there is a difficulty of you achieving this, I like to tell people to use the traditional way of storing, like the crib we do for the corn. In the village, you will see they will do the corn, they will just leave it outside, right? And it is there, nothing is happening. They will just raise the crib in some instances and set fire under so that the heat will help in drying the maize and also preventing those flying pests from coming in. And you can use charcoal cooler. Charcoal cooler is also good for keeping crops like tomatoes and vegetables. And of course, oranges. For some of us that are living in the village where our farm is domiciled, we can have a charcoal cooler where it will be cooling. It's as important as a cold room. This charcoal cooler is as good as a cold room where these things are maintained at a room temperature. Subsequently, like I said, the practical time, I'll be showing you all those things. By this time, it will be what the Blessed Feeds is requesting. We'll do a slide so that I'll be sharing the screen with you, and then you'll be following in that order. In that way, we can see what these things look like. So when you keep your plants in your grains in a cool temperature, in a well-ventilated place, and you sort them out, separating the bad ones from the good ones, you are going to have a minimal level of damage, of wastage from your harvest. That is what you are going to achieve. Unfortunately, most people do not do this. As they are harvesting, they are bringing, they are storing in. They are bringing, they are storing in. Those organisms are multiplying. They are multiplying. By the time you feel that this is the right time for you to put your chemicals or whatever it is you are trying to preserve them with, they have already infested. And by the time those things start to take effect, they have already damaged your crops. And then you have nothing to take home. So it is important that you should sort. It is important that you sort. And if you are storing your grain, for instance, in sacks, there are acceptable sacks that you store. We have what is called the PICs. the PICs bags, they are no that the zero flies, the zero fly bags, the zero fly bags. For those of us that use sugar, for those of us that are familiar with sugar bag is better than these other sacks you buy in the town for storage. Because sugar bag is made in such a way that the content does not exchange air with the environment. So it is even better for you to use that sack if you cannot get the PICs or the zero fly bags. You can use the sugar bag. It's a good alternative. That is the one I use primarily. I don't use these other sacks that they buy in 50 kg, 100 kgs that you have in 500 kg. They're not good for storage because they have spaces in them that the atmosphere, they exchange the inner atmosphere, the inner content with the atmosphere within which they are kept. And it's not good because these organisms don't need oxygen to survive. But when you bring in oxygen, they need oxygen to survive. So when you give them that opportunity where they can have oxygen, they will begin to cause more damage on your crops. But when you prevent them from having the opportunity of having access to oxygen, they will never cause further damage. So it is important that you should use sacks that are not breathable sacks that have airtight content. In that way, you can be able to achieve great yield in your post-harvest activities than losses. So use sugar bag-like bags if you can, or use containers that are airtight in storing your grains so that you don't incur damages. And for your yam, for instance, you will store them in a cool ventilated area, that is having air. The oxygen is much there so that they don't get rotten. Sometimes your yam gets rotten because yam breathes a lot and it has not fully dried to a point where you can keep it and feel relaxed. So because yam breathes, it does not want a compacted environment. If the environment is too congested for it, it easily gets rotten. So avoid areas where the surrounding is not having air exchanging between the inner environment and the outside environment. For yam and of course for cassava. If you cannot store your cassava, for instance, for long, you ferment it into akpu or ferment it into fufu, what people call it, and then you can make it into dry flakes so that you can be able to process it and use it for other purposes. These are the ways, some of the ways you can actually prevent post-harvest losses for major crops that we have in our society today that we farm as farmers. This is just a beginning of this session. We cannot exhaust the whole modules today, so much that some of them are better explained with practical videos or practical guides. So I do hope that for the things we have discussed so far, we have a background of how to go about saving our crops during the post-harvest time, so that we don't continue to waste a lot of the resources during the post-harvest time. So if you have any question from what we have discussed so far, please, you can, which means some produce should be stored in sacks and others should be kept in a pattern and allowed for breeding. Exactly. Some crops like grain, for instance, should be stored in sacks. Grains like beans, grains like corn, grains like soybean, grains like rice, they are best stored in the sack. But before you store them, be sure that they do not come with bad ones, because most of the time, those bad ones have pests already with their eggs already hatched in them. Like aphids, for instance, they lay their eggs in the field. So if you do not carefully observe it, you will carry it along and then bring it into the storehouse. Another thing you should also know is that the grain should dry to 12 to 13 moisture content. What that means is that if we should carry the grain and try to break it, it will be strong It will be strong, meaning that it has dried reasonably for storage. Or you can pour it into a container, carry a bottle, for you to know that it has dried very well. Carry a bottle, put salt inside, and fetch a quantity from the one you intend to store. Pour inside the container, inside the bottle with the salt, and close it. Then shake it. If after removing the seeds, the salt and the seeds are mashed together, or you see that the salt is kind of moist, you will understand that it has not fully dried. But if they are both separable, if they are both separate, they are not attaching on each other, there is no moisture in the salt, you will know that the seed is due for storage. So in that case, you can dry it. For things like yam, for instance, most especially, you don't put it in a sack. You put it in a well-ventilated place, cool, ventilated place, where there is no sun, but there is access to, there's exchange between the external and the internal environment where the yam is kept. And you should not put it on the floor. You should raise it a little. Raise a bed. You should make a bed raised and then put it on it from there to continue. In that way, your yam is not going to spoil at all. It's not going to get rotten. What spoils yam is when there is no exchange of oxygen between the yam and the environment. That is what spoils yam. Any other question? All right. So thank you so much. Okay, you're welcome, Mr. Daniel Paul. Thank you so much for tuning in. We do hope that we will continue to improve on this course. It is much important, like I said, it is as important as the planting in the field. So as much as I continue to teach us this on Facebook and on other social handles, I will continue to do my best